I think it's bad for everyone, frankly. It's not about protecting the public or minimum safety levels. Nurses, paramedics, firefighters, they do that now anyway. It's and they are members of the public, just like university workers, postal workers. They're members of the public. What this is about, it's about anti-union legislation. It's about anti-people legislation. When there's a pattern here. When the Tories run out of argument, they demonise and criminalise, whether that's Extinction Rebellion or whether it's scapegoating asylum seekers and refugees.
Just on that, Jerry,
and now they're demonising workers and criminalising workers.
Okay, I do get that, right? I do get that, Jerry, but at the same time as well, I would expect that the government would say, well, hang on a minute, if train strikes alone are costing our hospitality sector £1.5 billion a month, what Extinction Rebellion was costing them, should it not maybe have a duty to clamp down on that? I'll come back to you, Jerry. I'm going to go to political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt right now. David, your views when it comes to this particular anti-strike legislation. Is it against human rights?
No, of course it's not against human rights. The key point here is that these are public servants. They are not people employed in the private sector where they've struck a bargain with their employers, which the employer is now reneging on. These are people who choose to go into the public sector because of the extremely good benefits package they get, not only including their salaries, but their pensions and the amount of time off they get. They are holding the country to ransom at a time when the country cannot afford it. Not that the country should ever be held to ransom, but at this time in particular, when families have struggled over Christmas to see their other family members because the railways have been on strike, and when you have these overmighty barons of the trade unions, people like Mitt Lynch, essentially saying that we are not going to work. We are going to hold you to ransom until you give us what we want. This is extortion. Okay. And there is no way that public servants should be allowed to do this. If they want these sorts of rights, they should leave the public service and go and work in the private sector where they are free to strike a bargain that they either see as good or ill.
OK, Jerry, come back to that for me, please.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what's extortion. That's the energy bills, it's the soaring inflation, it's high taxation, it's wage stagnation. I'd like minimum safety standards. I didn't interrupt your colleague. I'd like minimum safety standards in our NHS on non-striking days. You wait hours for an ambulance. You wait in the ambulance for hours. You wait in a corridor for hours for a doctor. But they're not going to legislate for that. In fact, they'll rip up their targets in the NHS. This government has form on this. They demonise and criminalise when they're in trouble, and they're in trouble on all fronts. So they seek to take our minds off the real issues. This present government is Bolsonaro and Trump rolled into one. Suella Braverman's dream was to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, not to fix the NHS. Not to eradicate.
Well, that's not her job, though, Jerry, to be fair, isn't it? I mean, you know, that's not her job. She's the Home Secretary, she's not the Health Secretary. I do take your point. I think a lot of people might have been with you
for this anti-union legislation.
OK, sorry, I couldn't hear what you said there, but yes, something about anti-union legislation. David, I'll go back to you, Jerry, don't worry. David, go on, I could see you. You were getting angry there.
Well, I'm not angry. I'm just bemused how these people in the unions think that we're going to do anything about the state of public finances when they insist on higher and higher and higher wages and benefits at a time when the country can't afford it. Now, let's not even start talking about NHS funding, because that's a whole different kettle of fish, and that is, as we know, to mix metaphors, the elephant in the room of UK public finances. But the point remains that these people have chosen to work in an extremely well-financed public sector. They have chosen to do this because of the benefits that accrue to it and because of the extremely flexible working practices which many of your viewers in private industry do not have. Your viewers and the members of this country who are paying for this public service do not deserve to be held to ransom by these public servants. And it's as simple as that.
OK, Jerry, I suppose if the conditions are that bad and things are so awful, why don't people just get another job?
Well, you know, people are leaving in their droves. They're leaving the health service in their droves. To me, we may as well have a phrase mega now, make England great again. You know, we're talking nonsense here. In the public sector, year on year of 13 years of Tory government, there's been wage cuts, below inflation wage rises, or even no rises at all. It doesn't surprise me, after all this time, people have had enough.
I get that, Jerry. I get that. I do. Yeah, look, I absolutely understand what you're saying. I have the words echoing in my ear of people who had children on cancer ward beds, for example, when nurses were striking, or people whose elderly relatives couldn't get health care when they were lying at the bottom of the stairs, and it is making, or people who couldn't go and see dying loved ones, had to get the train to go and see them over the Christmas period, etc. And I do have their words ringing in my ears, thinking, I reckon they probably do want minimum service levels. I'll throw it back to you for the final word, David, on certainly when it comes to pay rises, etc. Has there been a real pay cut and all of this stuff?
Everybody in the country has taken a real terms pay cut because of inflation and because of the austerity that was necessary at the beginning of the 13 years of the Tory government. But the point is that the private sector, which pays the bills for the public sector, has suffered much worse. People in the private sector are really suffering, and they are being made to suffer even more by these overmighty trade unionists.